Hello everyone, we are from Group 1 and we're gonna talk about the government system and policy of UK. Next. Okay, so here is our members of the group. The first one is me, Silvia Devi, and then Ohara Cristhoper, Tiara Haninditya, Septian Paradesa, Marintan Bening, and the last one is Lembayung Kinani. Next. Okay, so the first topic is about UK government. Next. The system of government in the UK. So the British system of government is best described as a parliamentary democracy. However, unlike what one would expect in a democracy, the people are not constitutionally in control of the state. In the UK, collective sovereignty rests within the three branches of parliament, including the Crown, the House of Lords, and the House of Commons. The UK follows the model of representative democracy, wherein the citizens elect the representative to govern on their behalf. Every 5 years, the people of Britain are given the opportunity to vote for their preferred representative to serve in parliament. And in the 19th century, the parliament underwent reform in 1832, and several acts were passed to allow more people to vote. However, it wasn't until the representations of the People Acts of 1918 and 1928 that the UK officially became a democracy, as both men and women over 21 were granted to the right to vote. Next. Okay, so in the UK, the monarchy is hereditary and the reigning monarch serves as the head of state and symbol of national unity. The succession follows the oldest male child or the oldest female offspring if no males are present. The monarch holds no real political power but serves as the psychological cement to hold a country together. The prime minister or PM, on the other hand, is the head of government and is responsible for picking the cabinet, leading the party, and making also balancing policies. Government ministers are usually members of the House of Commons with occasional appointments from the House of Lords, and the cabinet is the essential core of the government, consisting of around 20 senior ministers invited by the prime minister. The cabinet government requires collective responsibility and confidentiality. And next is the PM is the head of the government and the majority party in HOC or House of Commons. They have strong party loyalty and often get their way. They can call elections before the 5 year deadline. The PM directs the cabinet and must maintain party support. The cabinet has about 20 members appointed by the PM and is responsible for individual government departments. They must appear unified and take responsibility for policy and their collective responsibility. Cabinet officials who cannot support government decisions must resign and return to the legislature. Next will be delivered by my friend.
All right, the next part will be about the local government. So when we talk about the government, we will automatically talk about politics too, because these two things cannot be separated. And to begin the discussion, because Sylvia already present about the overall view about the government, now we will start to look at the smaller part, which is the local government throughout the UK. And later we will also discuss about the default structures in Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, and London. Next part, please. Next. So yeah. So historically, we all know that since the Anglo-Saxon era, the UK has been divided into several counties, and they have their own king, and also they are led by their local councils. So there have been consequently local government system in England, Wales, Scotland, and Ireland for centuries, which were organized by the local councils. Local government developed particularly in the 19th century to cope with the needs of rapidly growing population. And the income in the local level comes from the central grants and local council tax. And this income is to provide local services throughout the UK, such as education, health, fire services, transport, social services, sanitation, and housing through the elected council. And nowadays, the local system is currently using new structures to meet the social needs. However, people in the UK is not satisfied with the local government and show very low interest in the local government. This is because although many people count on the local government services, the system is languishing because the government's financial cuts to reduce the budget deficit. So, in UK, the local government is still dependent upon the centralized control and funding from the government, while no longer providing the full range of traditional local services, and also they are lacks adequate local power to fulfill its role in serving the communities. And the local government receives some critiques. The people in the UK criticize the local government because they want the local government to be more rigorous, competent, and independently finance localism with less bureaucracy, which would be accountable to local interests and free from the central government interference and control. Next. And now we will talk about the devolution. Here, devolution means the transfer of some political power from the UK Parliament. And devolution in the United Kingdom refers to the transfer power and responsibilities from the UK government to the national government of Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. And the process of devolution began in the late 1990s following the referendums in Scotland and Wales, and also the Good Friday Agreement in Northern Ireland. And this devolution allows the countries with their executive and first minister to decide their own affairs in default matters such as education, health, transport, environment, home affairs, and local government. The UK Parliament still has reserved power over some UK matters such as defense, foreign affairs, social security, taxation, broad economic policy, and immigration. So it means that under this devolution, the national governments of Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland has been given varying degrees of control over certain policy areas such as healthcare, education, and transportation. However, some areas remain the responsibility of the UK government. And this devolution has a very significant impact on the political landscape of the UK with the creation of the separate political institution and parties in Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. It also has led to more complex system of governance with overlapping responsibilities between the UK government and the national government. Next. All right, so this is the continuation of devolution. Devolution does not mean independence or separation from the UK for London, Scotland, and Wales and Northern Ireland, or a British federal system. But it is argued that devolution strengthens the UK and that legal sovereignty still rests with the UK Parliament and Westminster. In this sense, Britain has a unitary political system and remains a union of England, Scotland, and Wales, and Northern Ireland. In this sense, Britain has a unitary political system and remains a union of England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. Next will be delivered by my friend.
So the next we will going to talk about the British Constitution. So in Britain, there is no absolute separation of powers, for example, between executive and legislature. And Britain is sometimes described as a constitutional monarchy, where the monarch reigns as head of state without executive powers under constitutional limitations. And it also referred to as a parliamentary system, where the UK Parliament consisting of the House of Commons, the House of Lords, and formally the monarch in London is the legislature and has traditionally possessed the supreme power to make laws in UK matters until the EU entry. Next. The relationship between prime minister, cabinet, and parliament can be combative and sometimes constitutionally unclear. And Britain has no written constitution contained in one document. Instead, the constitution consists of distinctive elements which are mostly in written form. And Britain, the constitutional elements are said to be flexible enough to respond quickly to the new conditions. UK law can be created or changed by the Westminster Parliament through Acts of Parliament. The common law can be extended by the judiciary, and conventions can be altered, made, or abolished by the general agreement. And the next is in constitutional theory, the British people, although historically subjects of the crown, have political sovereignty to choose the UK government by means of general elections, while parliament, consisting of their elected representative in the Commons, members of parliament or MPs, has legal supremacy to make laws and is the focus of UK sovereignty. Next. So the criticism of the constitutional system in the British. Next. So the UK government and administrative bodies are arguably too centralized and secretive. It is maintained that Britain is controlled by unelected groups or bodies which the government appoints, while politicians are accused of being isolated from the lives of their constituents. There have been campaigns for more open government and effective protection of individual liberties through a written constitution, greater scrutiny of parliamentary legislation, a Freedom of Information Act, incorporation of the European Convention on Human Rights into UK law, and reform of the House of Lords, etc. In response to these concerns, a Labour government introduced a Freedom of Information Act in 2000 and incorporated the European Convention into British law by passing the Human Rights Act in 1998. However, adequate reform of the House of Lords has not happened. The Freedom of Information Act is criticized as lacking teeth and being potentially controlled by the authorities. The Human Rights Act is having a controversial effect on several levels. It allows the courts to rule in cases of alleged breaches of fundamental human rights which are brought to them. And the last is critics feels that the parliamentary system is out of date. Also, it is felt that national policies have become too conditioned by party politics, that government is too removed from popular and regional concerns and does not reflect contemporary diversity, and that it operates on too many unaccountable levels. Next. So to sum up, the system has been reformed, but weaknesses remain, and critics feel that politicians are removed from the daily realities and concerns of modern life and the experience of their constituents. Next. So the British monarchy, the constitutional title of the UK Parliament is the King in Parliament, which means that state and government business is carried out in the monarch's name by the system's politicians and officials. However, the crown is only sovereign and by the will of parliament and acceptance by the people. Royal executive power has disappeared, but the monarch still has formal constitutional roles and is head of state, head of the executive, judiciary, and legislature, supreme governor of the Church of England, and commander-in-chief of the armed forces. Government ministers and officials are the monarch's servants, and many public office holders swear allegiance to the crown. Next. So the monarch is expected to be politically neutral, which is supposed to reign but not rule, and cannot make laws, impose taxes, spend public money, or act unilaterally. And the monarch acts only on the advice of government ministers, which cannot be ignored. And Britain is therefore governed by His Majesty's government in the name of the king. He has a similar role in the devolved governments. And it performs important duties such as the opening and dissolving of the UK Parliament, giving the real assent or signature to bills that have been passed by both houses of parliament, appointing government ministers and public figures, granting honors, leading proceedings of the Privy Council, and fulfilling international duties as head of state. And it has also the right to be informed of all aspects of national life by receiving government documents and meeting weekly by the prime minister with the prime minister. And next is it also has the constitutional right to encourage, warn, and advise ministers. The impact of royal advice on formal and informal levels may be significant and raises questions about whether such influence should be held by an unelected figure who might either support or undermine elected political leaders. And the last is much of the cost of the royal family's official duties is now met from the sovereign grant, which is public funds which are approved by the parliament. Following concern over expense, these funds were reduced to cover a few members of the immediate royal family and amounted in 2018 to 43 million pounds. Next. So the last is the critic about the British monarchy. The critics of the monarchy argue that it lacks adaptability, is out of date, undemocratic, expensive, associated with aristocratic privilege and establishment thinking, and reflects an English rather than a British identity. It is argued that the monarchy's distance and isolation from ordinary life sustains class divisions and hierarchy within society. It is also suggested that if the monarch functions today are merely ceremonial and lack power, it would be more rational to abolish the office and replace it with a less expensive non-executive presidency. And the other hand, critics who favor the continuation of the monarchy argue that it is popular, has adapted to modern requirements, and is a symbol of national unity. It is seen as a defender of the constitution and a personification of the state, shows stability and continuity, has more prestige than politicians, is not subject to political manipulations, plays a worthwhile role in national institutions, is neutral, performs ambassadorial functions, and promotes the interests of Britain abroad. Next will be presented by my friend. Okay. So the Privy Council, historically, it developed from a group of royal advisors into the executive branch of the monarch government. Its powerful position declined in the 18th and 19th centuries as its functions were transferred to a parliamentary cabinet and new ministers. Today, its members advise the monarch on government business that does not need to pass through parliament and may serve on influential committees. There are 400 privy councillors, but the body works in small groups. And today's most important tasks of the Privy Council are performed by its Judicial Committee, the final court of appeal from some Commonwealth countries and dependencies, and may also be used by other bodies in Britain and overseas. Next.
Okay, the next few slides will talk about the UK Parliament role, legislations, and elections. So the United Kingdom's Parliament is housed in London's Palace of Westminster. It comprises the non-elected House of Lords, the elected House of Commons, and the monarch. So, House of Lords. The members of the House of Lords are not elected. They inherit their seats from their fathers, and the members are called life peers. For House of Commons, MPs or member of the parliaments are elected by the British public or British citizens. The House of Commons has 651 seats, and the chairman is called the Speaker. A parliament had a maximum duration of 5 years, and any dissolution of parliament and the issue of writs for an election was ordered by the monarch on the advice of the prime minister. So what are their roles? Parliament has legal power in all matters and creates, abolishes, or amends laws and institutions for all or any parts of Britain. Parliament also votes on allotting finance to the government to pursue its national obligations, examines government policies and administration, and also debates political issues. The United Kingdom is a constitutional monarchy in which the reigning monarch, the king or queen who is head of the state at any given time, does not make any political decision. Thus, all political decisions are taken by the government and parliament. So, supply bill, type of legislation introduced in the UK Parliament by the government to seek approval for its spending plans. The House of Lords play a big role in making and shaping laws as well as checking and challenging the government. It shares this role with the House of Commons. The Lord has a reputation for thorough and detailed scrutiny. The House of Lords debates legislations and has power to amend or reject bills. The next slides will be presented by my friend.
Okay, so next up is UK Parliament legislation and procedure. Parliamentary procedure in both houses of Parliament is based on custom, convention, precedent, and detailed rules. The Speaker, who protects the House against any abuse of procedure by controlling debates and votes, is the chief officer of the House of Commons, is chosen by MPs, interprets the rules of the House, and is assisted by 3 deputy speakers. The Speaker is important for the orderly running of the House. MPs can be combative and unruly, and the Speaker can sometimes dismiss or suspend the member from the House. Both houses' proceedings are open to the public and may be watched from the public and visitors' galleries. Hansard, the parliamentary newspaper, publishes transactions daily, debates are televised, and radio broadcasts can be live or recorded. The legislative process is an extension of the simple debate format. The government generally produces preparatory papers prior to the establishment of new UK law and revisions to existing law. The preparatory papers are called Green Paper and White Paper. A Green Paper is a consultative document that allows interested parties to state their case before a bill is introduced into Parliament, and a White Paper is not normally consultative but is a document that details the prospective legislation. Next slide, please. And a draft law takes the form of a bill. Most bills are public and other bills may be considered private. Public bills involve state business and are introduced by the government in either House of Parliament. Private bills deal with issues such as a local government, while some are private members' bills introduced by MPs in their individual capacity. Bills must pass both houses and get royal approval before becoming law. Normally, the Commons is the first step in the process. A non-financial bill can be voted down or delayed by the Lords. And when the bill has eventually passed through Commons and Lords, it is sent to the monarch for the royal agreement. Finally, the bill becomes an act of Parliament and is placed on the statute book as representing the law of the land at that time. Next, please. And next is the UK Parliament elections. For Westminster parliamentary elections to the House of Commons, the United Kingdom is split into 650 constituencies. General elections are held by secret ballot, although voting is not mandatory. British, Commonwealth, and Irish Republic nationals are eligible to vote if they live in the UK, are on the constituency registers of voters, are 18 or older, and are not disqualified. Those not entitled to vote include mentally ill patients in hospital or jail, anyone convicted of corrupt or unlawful election activities, condemned convicts, and members of the House of Lords. Next slide, please. The candidate who wins the most votes in a constituency is elected MP for that area. This is known as the simple majority or first past the post system. There is no voting by proportional representation, except for some devolved government elections, which have a mixture of different systems. Some see the Westminster electoral system as undemocratic and unfair to smaller parties. The two big parties, which are Labour and Conservative, have favored the existing system since it gives them a greater chance of achieving power. And lastly, weak minority and small or no majority government can result from the first past the post system, and campaigns continue to change the system. Next will be explained by my friend.
All right, so the next one, we're talking about UK parliamentary control of government. So British governments have historically tended to govern pragmatically. The emphasis was on whether policies worked and were generally acceptable. The combination of adversarial politics, cabinet government, and party discipline in the Commons seemed to provide a balance between efficient government and public accountability. Yet, both conservative and Labour governments have become more intent on pushing their policies through Parliament. Constitutional theory suggests that Parliament should control the executive. However, unless there is small majority government, rebellion by government MPs, or significant public protests, a government with a reasonable overall majority in the Commons should be able to carry its policies through Parliament, irrespective of parliamentary attempts to restrain it. The House of Lords has only a delaying and amending power over government legislation. Generally, opposition parties can also oppose in the Commons and hope to persuade the electorate to dismiss the government at the next general election. Next slide, please. And then examination of government programs can be employed at question time in the Commons when the Prime Minister or other minister for 30 minutes on Wednesdays is subjected to oral questions from the leader of the opposition and MPs. The opposition parties can also choose their own topics for formal debate on a limited number of days each session, which can also be used to attack the government. A 1967 attempt to restrain the executive was the creation of the Parliamentary Commissioner for Administration, or Ombudsman, who can investigate alleged bad administration by ministers and civil servants. In an attempt to improve the situation, a select committee system was created in 1979, which now has some 39 committees for the House of Commons and others for the Lords, as well as joint and other special committees. They comprise MPs from most parties who monitor the administration and policies of the main government departments and investigate proposed legislation. It is often argued that the real work of the House and parliamentary control of the executive is done in the select committees and in their televised examinations of individuals. Select committees can be effective in examining legislation and expenditure, and their reports can be damaging to a government. Okay, next. Okay, that's all our presentation about UK government system and policies. Hopefully this material can be useful for you, and thank you.